Okay, so here's a question that should make you uncomfortable. What would you give up for ultimate freedom? Not freedom like I can do whatever I want on Saturday. I mean freedom, capital F. Freedom from suffering. Freedom from the endless cycle of wanting, getting, losing, wanting again. Freedom from death itself, because you've transcended the whole game of birth and rebirth. Now, what if I told you that to get there, you'd have to walk away from everything, your money, your status, your comfort, your family, your clothes, literally everything. Would you do it? In 599 BC, a prince in ancient India actually made that choice, and the philosophy he developed from that radical act of renunciation is still challenging our assumptions about violence, truth, and what it means to be free. His name was Mahavira, and before you write this off as ancient history or exotic Eastern mysticism, let me tell you what makes his ideas genuinely dangerous even today. First, he rejected the existence of God. Completely. In deeply religious ancient India, he said, "There's no creator, no divine plan, no one to save you. Just you, your choices, and the consequences." Second, he claimed that absolute truth is impossible to grasp from any single perspective. Every viewpoint is partial, every claim is conditional. This is philosophical pluralism 2,600 years before postmodernism. Third, he insisted that women have exactly the same capacity for spiritual liberation as men. In 599 BC, in a warrior culture. This wasn't progressive, it was revolutionary. And here's what ties it all together. His central principle wasn't love, wasn't faith, wasn't obedience. It was ahimsa, absolute nonviolence toward all living beings, not just humans, all beings, in thought, word, and deed. So this isn't museum philosophy we're studying today. These ideas still have teeth. They still challenge how we think about God, truth, gender, animals, the environment, and what we owe to each other. The question isn't whether you'll agree with Mahavira. The question is whether you're willing to take his ideas seriously enough to let them disturb you. Because that's what good philosophy does. It doesn't comfort, it confronts. Let me paint you a picture of the most dramatic career change in philosophical history. The year is 599 BC. The place is Bihar, in northeastern India. A boy is born into royalty, Prince Vardhaman. He's got everything. Wealth beyond measure, political power waiting for him, luxury, status, a future as a king, the ancient Indian equivalent of being born a billionaire prince. He grows up in this world of silk and servants, gets married, has a daughter. He's living the dream, right? The kind of life people would kill for. And then, at age 30, he walks away from all of it. Not because of a scandal, not because he lost it all, he just leaves. Renounces everything. Takes off his royal robes, puts on a simple cloth, and walks into the forest to become a wandering ascetic. But here's where it gets extreme. After a year, he takes off even that simple cloth. For the next 12 years, he wanders India completely naked. Why? Because even clothing is a form of attachment to the material world. Even that thin piece of fabric is something you can cling to. 12 years. Meditating in forests. Fasting for days, sometimes weeks. Enduring heat, cold, hunger, the mockery of villagers who thought he was insane. Standing perfectly still for hours. Practicing such intense mental discipline that, according to the tradition, he didn't even swat mosquitoes that bit him because that would be violence. And violence, ahimsa, is what keeps the soul bound to the cycle of suffering. Now you might be thinking, okay, crazy ascetic, India had lots of those. True. But Mahavira wasn't just some random holy man, he was the 24th Tirthankara, the 24th Ford maker or spiritual teacher in the Jain tradition. Think of Tirthankaras as people who found the way across the river of suffering and come back to show others the path. He wasn't starting a new religion. He was perfecting and completing a spiritual tradition that already existed, but his teachings, his systematic philosophy of liberation, those were revolutionary. And here's what you need to understand. This wasn't symbolic renunciation. This wasn't, I'm giving up chocolate for Lent. This was total, absolute, no going back rejection of everything the world values. Power, wealth, pleasure, comfort, even basic dignity. Why would anyone do this? That's the question that drives everything we're going to explore today. What was Mahavira actually seeking in those forests? What goal could possibly be worth 12 years of naked wandering and self-denial? The answer isn't enlightenment in some vague, feel-good sense. Mahavira had a specific, concrete objective: A state of being so radically different from normal human existence that it required destroying every attachment, every desire, every particle of ego. He called it moksha, liberation. And according to Jain philosophy, it's not a metaphor, it's a real, achievable state where the soul breaks free from the endless cycle of birth, death, and rebirth, where you attain infinite knowledge, literally knowing everything. Where suffering becomes impossible because you've transcended the very conditions that make suffering possible. After those 12 years of extreme asceticism, Mahavira achieved it. He attained Keval omniscience, complete, perfect knowledge of all reality, past, present, and future. Now, whether you believe that's literally possible or not, here's what matters philosophically. Mahavira spent the rest of his life, another 30 years, teaching others how to achieve it. He developed a systematic path, a coherent philosophy of liberation that anyone could follow, and thousands did. Men and women, and this is crucial, men and women equally, walking away from their lives to pursue the same freedom Mahavira had found. So, when we study Mahavira's philosophy, we're not just studying abstract ideas, we're studying a practical system designed to achieve something specific, complete liberation from suffering through the elimination of karma and the purification of the soul. The question we need to ask ourselves is, even if we don't buy the metaphysics, even if we don't believe in literal omniscience or reincarnation, is there something in this radical commitment to nonviolence, truth, and non-attachment that challenges how we live? Because here's the thing, Mahavira didn't just theorize about freedom, he lived it, he tested it to the absolute extreme. And the philosophy that emerged from that experiment is still here, 2,600 years later, still making people uncomfortable. That's what we're diving into today. Alright, so now we need to understand what Mahavira was actually trying to achieve. Because liberation sounds nice, but what does it actually mean? Let's start with the problem. Samsara. Samsara is the cycle of birth, death, and rebirth. You're born, you live, you suffer, you die, and then you're born again, and again, and again. For Jains, this isn't poetic. This is literally what's happening. Your soul, jiva, is trapped in an endless loop of existence. Now here's the crucial part. This isn't like hitting the reset button on a video game where you start fresh. Every time you're reborn, you're carrying baggage, karmic baggage, and I don't mean that in the pop psychology sense of bad vibes or what goes around comes around. In Jain philosophy, karma is actual physical substance, microscopic particles that stick to your soul like dust on a mirror. Every action you take, every thought you think, every desire you feel, it attracts karmic matter, and this matter weighs you down. It obscures your soul's true nature. It keeps you bound to the cycle. So you die, but your karma doesn't. It determines what you're reborn as. Maybe human again. Maybe an animal. Maybe. And this is where Jainism gets really interesting. Maybe a hell being or a celestial being. The universe has multiple realms of existence, and your karma determines where you land. And then you live that life, accumulate more karma, die, get reborn again. Endless, exhausting, suffering all the way down. This is the problem Mahavira is trying to solve. Now, moksha, liberation, is the solution, but it's not just escape from the cycle. It's something far more radical. Let me break down what moksha actually means in Jain philosophy. First, breaking the cycle. You stop being reborn. The wheel of samsara stops turning for you. You're out. Permanently. But how? This is where it gets philosophically interesting. You achieve moksha by shedding all your karma, every last particle. You burn it off through spiritual practice, through following the path Mahavira laid out. Through absolute adherence to nonviolence, truth, non-stealing, chastity, and non-attachment. Through meditation, asceticism, right knowledge, right faith, right conduct. When all the karma is gone, the soul is finally revealed in its pure state. And here's what Jains believe that pure state is. Infinite knowledge. Keval jnana. Omniscience. You know everything. Past, present, future. Every atom in the universe, every thought every being has ever had. Complete, perfect, unlimited knowledge, infinite perception. You can perceive all of reality simultaneously without any sensory organs. Direct, unmediated awareness of everything. Infinite bliss. Not happiness in the sense of feeling good. Ananda. Pure, unchanging bliss that doesn't depend on circumstances because you've transcended circumstances entirely. Infinite power. Not power over others, but complete mastery over yourself. Nothing can disturb you. Nothing can bind you. You're absolutely free. Now, let's be honest about this. If you're a materialist, if you think consciousness is just brain activity, this sounds like fantasy. Impossible. The soul can't know everything. Because there is no soul, and even if there were, how would it access information about the entire universe? Fair objection. But here's what's philosophically interesting. Mahavira isn't asking you to take this on faith. He's saying, try the path, follow the practices, see what happens. It's empirical in a weird way. Test it yourself through direct experience. And here's the deeper question that matters even if you reject the metaphysics. What would it mean to live as if liberation were possible? What would it mean to take seriously the idea that your attachments, your desires, your violence, even in thought, are literally weighing you down, keeping you trapped in suffering? Because here's what Mahavira is really saying. You are responsible. Not God, not fate, not society. You. Your liberation is in your hands. Every choice you make either binds you further or moves you toward freedom. That's a terrifying level of responsibility. No one's going to save you. No divine grace. No cosmic accident. Just you, your discipline, and your commitment to the path. And this connects to something really important about Jain philosophy. It's not pessimistic. Yes, samsara is suffering. Yes, karma binds us. But liberation is achievable. Mahavira did it. The 23 Tirthankaras before him did it. Countless Jain monks and nuns throughout history have achieved it. It's hard. It requires giving up everything. But it's possible. So when we talk about moksha, we're not talking about heaven or some pleasant afterlife. We're talking about a complete transformation of existence. You don't go somewhere else. You become something else. A liberated soul, Siddha, existing in a state of pure consciousness, free from all limitation, all suffering, all bondage, forever. That's what Mahavira was seeking in those forests. That's what drove him to renounce a kingdom. That's the goal that makes sense of everything we're about to explore. Because if that's the destination, then the path, the 5 great vows, the philosophical system, the extreme discipline, it all clicks into place. It's not arbitrary. It's not about following rules for rules' sake. It's technology. Spiritual technology for achieving liberation. And that's what we're going to examine next. So, if moksha is the destination, how do you actually get there? What's the path? For Mahavira, it comes down to 5 fundamental commitments. 5 vows that form the bedrock of Jain spiritual practice. These aren't suggestions. They're not guidelines. For Jain monks and nuns, these are absolute unbreakable vows. For lay Jains, they're practiced in modified forms, but the principle remains the same. These vows aren't just ethical rules. They're a system for preventing new karma from sticking to your soul and for burning off the karma that's already there. They're tools for liberation. Let's go through them, and I want you to really think about what they mean. Not just intellectually, but practically. What would your life look like if you took even one of these seriously? First, Ahimsa, nonviolence. This is the cornerstone, the most sacred principle in all of Jainism. And it's not what you think. You're probably thinking, okay, don't kill people, don't hurt people. Got it. No, that's not even scratching the surface. Ahimsa means absolute nonviolence toward all living beings, not just humans, animals, insects, plants, everything that has life, jiva, and not just in action, in thought, in word, in deed. Jain monks sweep the ground in front of them as they walk so they don't accidentally step on insects. They wear cloth masks so they don't accidentally inhale and kill microorganisms. They don't eat root vegetables because harvesting them kills the plant. They don't eat after dark because insects might fly into their food and die. This sounds extreme, right? Maybe even absurd. But here's the philosophical point. Every act of violence, no matter how small, attracts karmic particles. If you're serious about liberation, you can't make exceptions. You can't say, well, mosquitoes don't count. Everything counts. And here's where it gets really challenging. Violence in thought. If you think angry, harmful thoughts about someone, that's violence. That attracts karma, even if you never act on it. So ahimsa isn't just about behavior. It's about transforming your entire relationship with the world. Seeing every living being as deserving of respect, compassion, non-harm. Second, Satya. Truthfulness. Seems straightforward. Don't lie. But wait, here's the paradox. What if telling the truth causes harm? What if you know something that, if you speak it, will hurt someone? What if your truth leads to violence? Jain philosophy has a subtle answer. Satya must be balanced with ahimsa. Truth that causes harm isn't true compassion. So you speak truth, but you speak it in a way that minimizes harm. You don't lie, but you also don't weaponize truth. This requires incredible discernment. You can't just blurt out whatever's true. You have to consider, is this necessary? Is this kind? Will this lead to greater harm or greater good? And here's another layer. You have to be truthful with yourself. Self-deception attracts karma just like lying to others. You can't achieve liberation while lying to yourself about your attachments, your desires, your violence. Third, Asteya, non-stealing. Again, seems simple. Don't take what isn't yours. But Jainism goes deeper. Asteya means not taking anything that isn't freely and willingly given. So if someone gives you something out of obligation, out of fear, out of social pressure, that's still a form of stealing. You're taking something they didn't truly want to give. It also means not taking more than you need. Hoarding is a form of theft. You're taking resources that could go to others. And it extends to intangibles. Taking credit for someone else's idea? Theft. Taking someone's time without permission? Theft. Taking advantage of someone's kindness? Theft. The principle is respect for others' property and rights. Complete respect. Not because of laws or social norms, but because taking what isn't freely given creates karmic bonds. Fourth, Brahmacharya, chastity and control over sensual desires. For monks and nuns, this means complete celibacy, no sexual activity whatsoever. For lay Jains, it means faithfulness to one's spouse and control over sexual desires. But it's not just about sex. Brahmacharya is about mastery over all sensual desires. Food, comfort, pleasure, entertainment, anything that pulls you toward the material world. Why? Because desire is what keeps you bound. Every time you indulge a desire, you're reinforcing your attachment to the physical world. You're telling your soul, this is where satisfaction comes from. And that's a lie. Real satisfaction, real freedom, comes from transcending desire altogether. This is probably the hardest vow for modern people to understand. We live in a culture that says, follow your desires, do what feels good, you deserve pleasure. Jainism says the opposite. Your desires are chains, break them. Fifth, Aparigraha, non-attachment to possessions. For monks and nuns, this means owning literally nothing except maybe a begging bowl and a piece of cloth. For lay Jains, it means minimizing possessions and not being attached to what you have. But here's the key. It's not about the stuff itself. It's about the attachment. You could own very little and still be deeply attached. You could own a lot and hold it lightly. Aparigraha is about freedom from greed, from hoarding, from the constant wanting of more. It's about recognizing that possessions are temporary, that you can't take them with you, and that clinging to them creates suffering. In our consumer culture, this vow is revolutionary. We're constantly told that happiness comes from acquiring more. Better phone, bigger house, nicer car, more clothes, more experiences. Aparigraha says that's a trap. The more you have to lose. The more you want, the more you suffer. Real freedom comes from needing nothing. Now here's what ties all 5 vows together. They're a system for breaking your bonds to the material world. Every time you practice ahimsa, you're not creating new violent karma. Every time you practice satya, you're not creating karmic bonds through deception. And so on. But they're also incredibly difficult. Even lay Jains who practice modified versions find these vows challenging, and for monks and nuns who take them absolutely, they require complete transformation of life. Which raises the question, is this realistic? Can normal people actually live like this? Mahavira would say, if you want liberation, yes. If you're serious about ending suffering, yes. If you're willing to give up everything for freedom, yes. But here's what's philosophically interesting. Even if you don't accept the metaphysics, even if you don't believe in karma as physical particles or reincarnation or moksha, these vows still challenge us. What would it mean to practice absolute nonviolence? To never lie, even when truth is hard? To take only what's freely given? To master your desires instead of being mastered by them? To hold your possessions lightly? These aren't just ancient rules. They're a radical critique of how we live now. And that's what makes Mahavira's philosophy still dangerous, still relevant, still capable of disturbing us 2,600 years later. Okay, so we've covered the ethical system, the 5 great vows. But Mahavira wasn't just a moral teacher, he was a philosopher. And he developed what might be the most sophisticated theory of knowledge and truth to come out of ancient India. It's called Anekantavada. And it's going to mess with your assumptions about truth. Let me start with a story. You've probably heard this one, but stay with me because the philosophical implications are wild. 6 blind men encounter an elephant. Each one touches a different part. The first grabs the trunk and says, "An elephant is like a rope. Long, flexible, cylindrical." The second touches the leg and says, "No, an elephant is like a pillar. Thick, solid, vertical." The third feels the side and says, "You're both wrong. An elephant is like a wall, flat, broad, immovable." The fourth grabs the tail. "It's like a brush." The fifth touches the ear. "It's like a fan." The sixth feels the tusk. "It's like a spear." They start arguing. Each one is absolutely convinced they're right and the others are wrong. They might even come to blows over it. Now here's the question, who's right? The answer is, they all are. And they're all wrong. Each blind man has a partial truth. Each one's experience is valid from their perspective. But none of them has the whole truth. The elephant is all of these things and none of these things. It's more than any single perspective can capture. This is Anekantavada, the doctrine of many-sidedness. The philosophical principle that reality is complex, multifaceted, and cannot be fully grasped from any single viewpoint. Now, before you think this is just ancient relativism, everyone's truth is equally valid, man. Hold on. That's not what Mahavira is saying. He's not saying there's no objective truth. The elephant exists. It has a real nature. But our perspectives on it are always partial, always limited by where we're standing, what we can perceive, what concepts we're using. Here's the radical part. This applies to everything, every philosophical claim, every religious doctrine, every scientific theory, every political position. All of them are perspectives on reality, and all of them are necessarily incomplete. Think about what this means. In 6th century BC, in a culture where religious authorities claimed absolute truth, where Brahmins said the Vedas are the final word, where kings claimed divine right, Mahavira says, your perspective is partial. You don't have the whole truth. Nobody does. That's philosophically dangerous. That's intellectually revolutionary. But here's where it gets even more interesting. Mahavira developed a logical system to express this idea. It's called Syadvada, the doctrine of maybe or somehow. Syadvada says that any statement about reality should be qualified with syat, maybe or in some respect, because absolute unqualified claims are always false. They claim to capture the whole truth from a single perspective, which is impossible. The classical formulation has 7 conditional predications. Let me give you an example using a simple statement. The jar exists. 1. Maybe the jar exists, from the perspective of its material substance. 2. Maybe the jar does not exist, from the perspective of other substances it's not. 3. Maybe the jar exists and does not exist, sequentially from different perspectives. 4. Maybe the jar is indescribable, from the perspective of trying to capture both simultaneously. 5. Maybe the jar exists and is indescribable, combining affirmation with limitation. 6. Maybe the jar does not exist and is indescribable, combining negation with limitation. 7. Maybe the jar exists, does not exist, and is indescribable, the complete view. Now, I know what you're thinking. This is word games. This is philosophical gymnastics that doesn't mean anything. But wait. Think about what Syadvada is actually doing. It's forcing intellectual humility. It's saying, before you make absolute claims, recognize the limitations of your perspective. Qualify your statements. Acknowledge uncertainty. This is ancient India's version of epistemic modesty, and it has real-world applications. Think about political debates. How often do people claim absolute truth? This policy is definitely right. So, that position is obviously wrong. Anekantavada says, maybe from your perspective, given your values and information. But have you considered other perspectives? Think about religious conflicts. My God is the true God. My scripture is the final revelation. Anekantavada says, your perspective on the divine is real to you, but it's not the whole truth. Others have different but equally partial perspectives. Think about scientific theories. We act like current scientific consensus is absolute truth, but history shows us that scientific understanding evolves. Newton's physics was true from a certain perspective, at a certain scale. Einstein's relativity revealed a deeper truth. Quantum mechanics revealed another layer. Each perspective is valid in its domain, but none captures everything. This is what Anekantavada is getting at. Reality is too complex for any single framework to capture completely. Now here's the philosophical challenge. Does Anekantavada refute itself? If all perspectives are partial, isn't Anekantavada itself just a partial perspective? If we should qualify all claims with maybe, shouldn't we say maybe Anekantavada is true? Jain philosophers have an answer. Yes. Anekantavada itself is a perspective. But it's a meta-perspective. A perspective about perspectives. It's not claiming to give you the whole truth about reality. It's claiming to give you a truth about how to approach truth, and here's why this matters practically. Anekantavada promotes tolerance. Not the weak tolerance of everyone's entitled to their opinion, but the strong tolerance of your perspective reveals something real that mine might miss. It promotes dialogue. If no one has the whole truth, then we need to listen to each other. We need to integrate perspectives. The blind men need to compare notes to understand the elephant. It promotes intellectual humility. You can hold your beliefs strongly while admitting you might be wrong. You can commit to a position while remaining open to new evidence, new perspectives. In our current moment, with political polarization, religious extremism, ideological tribalism, Anekantavada feels almost prophetic. What would change if we approach disagreements with, maybe I'm seeing part of the truth and maybe you're seeing a different part? But here's where Mahavira takes it further. He doesn't just apply this to abstract philosophy, he applies it to ethics, to practice, to how you live, which brings us to something that's going to sound even more radical. All right, here's where Mahavira really becomes controversial. We've talked about his ethics, his epistemology. Now let's talk about his cosmology. Deep breath. Here it is. There is no God. No creator deity, no supreme being who made the universe, no divine plan, no cosmic judge. No one watching over you, testing you, or waiting to reward or punish you after death. Nothing. In 6th century BC India, surrounded by Vedic religion with its pantheon of gods, emerging Hinduism with Brahman, competing schools of thought all assuming some divine reality, Mahavira says, none of that exists. Now, let me be clear about what he's rejecting. He's not saying there are no supernatural beings. Jainism actually accepts the existence of gods and celestial beings. But these are just souls at a higher level of samsara. They're trapped in the cycle of rebirth just like us. They're not eternal. They're not creators. They're not saviors. What Mahavira is rejecting is the concept of a supreme creator God. An all-powerful, all-knowing being who designed and controls the universe. Why? Let's look at his reasoning. First, the universe is eternal. It has no beginning and no end. It wasn't created, it has always existed. If there's no creation event, there's no need for a creator. The cosmos operates according to natural laws, eternal, unchanging principles. Karma is one of these laws, cause and effect, action and consequence. These laws govern everything, including the gods themselves. Second, the problem of evil. If God is all-powerful and all good, why is there suffering? Why is there injustice? The usual answers, free will, divine plan, testing faith, Mahavira finds unconvincing. His answer is simpler. There is no God to blame. Suffering exists because of karma. You suffer because of your own actions in this life and past lives. Not because God wills it, not because you're being tested, because of natural law. Third, personal responsibility. And this is the crucial philosophical point. If there's a creator God, then ultimately that God is responsible for your existence, your nature, your circumstances. You can pray for help. You can seek divine grace. Salvation comes from outside yourself. Mahavira says, no. You are completely responsible. Your bondage is your own doing. Your liberation is your own achievement. No one can save you. No one can grant you moksha. You have to earn it through your own effort. This is radical autonomy. Radical self-responsibility. It's terrifying and liberating at the same time. Think about what this means practically. You can't pray your way out of karma. You can't ask for forgiveness and have your slate wiped clean. You can't rely on divine grace to save you at the last moment. You have to do the work, follow the vows, burn off the karma, purify the soul. It's all on you. Now I want you to feel the weight of this. In most religious traditions, there's a safety net. You can mess up and still be saved. God's mercy, Christ's sacrifice, Allah's compassion, Krishna's grace, there's always a path to redemption through divine intervention. Jainism says there is no safety net. There is only cause and effect. You create your bondage through violence, lies, theft, desire, attachment. You create your liberation through ahimsa, truth, non-stealing, chastity, non-attachment. It's mechanical, it's impersonal, it's fair. Everyone plays by the same rules. But it's also unforgiving. There are no shortcuts. Now here's a question. Is this atheism? Not exactly. Mahavira isn't saying, I've proven God doesn't exist. He's saying the concept of a creator. God doesn't explain what we observe, and it undermines personal responsibility. It's more like philosophical naturalism. The universe operates according to natural laws. Souls exist, karma exists, rebirth exists. But these are natural phenomena, not supernatural ones. They're part of how reality works. And here's what's fascinating. This makes Jainism one of the oldest non-theistic religions in the world. Older than Buddhism, which also rejects a creator god. It's a complete spiritual system with liberation, ethics, cosmology, practice that doesn't require God. You can achieve the highest spiritual goal. Moksha. Infinite knowledge. Eternal bliss. Without any divine help whatsoever. Think about how this changes the spiritual equation. It's not about faith. It's not about belief. It's not about your relationship with God. It's about knowledge, discipline, and practice. Right knowledge of reality. Right faith in the path. Right conduct according to the vows. The three jewels of Jainism, Samyak Darshan, right faith, Samyak Jnana, right knowledge, Samyak Charitra, right conduct. These three together lead to liberation. No God required. But here's where it gets philosophically interesting. If there's no God, what grounds ethics? Why should you follow the 5 great vows? In theistic religions, the answer is often, because God commands it. Or because it's God's nature. Or because you'll be punished, rewarded by God. Mahavira's answer, because it's how reality works. Violence attracts karma. Nonviolence prevents karma. This isn't a moral rule imposed from outside. It's a natural law. Like gravity. You don't follow ahimsa because God said so. You follow ahimsa because if you want liberation, that's what works. It's practical. It's empirical in a sense. Test it yourself. This is ethics grounded in metaphysics, not divine command, and it makes ethics universal, true for everyone in all times, regardless of culture or belief. Now, I know some of you are thinking, this sounds cold, impersonal. Where's the love? Where's the comfort? Fair question. Jainism isn't a comforting religion in the way Christianity or devotional Hinduism can be. There's no loving God watching over you. There's no promise of heaven. There's just you, your karma, and the long, difficult path to liberation. But there's something powerful in that too. You're not a child dependent on a cosmic parent. You're not a servant obeying a master. You're an autonomous being with infinite potential, working toward your own liberation. And here's the compassion. Mahavira taught this path to everyone, not just the elite, not just men, not just the upper castes. Everyone has the same capacity for liberation. Everyone can achieve what he achieved. No intermediaries needed. No priests to intercede. No special revelation required. Just the teachings, the practice, and your own effort. That's a kind of spiritual democracy, and in 6th century BCE, that was revolutionary. So when we ask what happened to the idea of God in Mahavira's philosophy, the answer is, it became unnecessary. The universe explains itself. Karma explains suffering. Personal effort explains liberation. God doesn't solve any problems that the Jain system doesn't already solve more elegantly. And that raises the question we're going to explore next. If karma is the mechanism of bondage and liberation, what exactly is karma? How does it work? Because Mahavira's answer to that question is weird. Really weird. And it's going to challenge everything you think you know about cause and effect. Okay. So we've established that there's no God in Jain philosophy. You're on your own. Your liberation depends entirely on dealing with karma. But here's where Jainism gets genuinely strange. And I mean that in the best philosophical sense. Strange in a way that makes you question your assumptions about how reality works. Most of us think of karma as metaphorical, right? What goes around comes around. Bad vibes attract bad outcomes. It's a vague moral principle about consequences. Jainism says, no, karma is physical, literal, material. Karma is made of actual particles, pujala, subtle matter that exists in the universe, and these particles stick to your soul like dust sticking to a mirror, or like iron filings attracted to a magnet. Let me say that again because it's important. In Jain metaphysics, karma is not a moral law. It's not a cosmic accounting system. It's actual stuff. Physical substance. You can't see it or measure it with instruments, but it's as real as atoms. Your soul, jiva, is pure consciousness in its natural state. Infinite knowledge, infinite perception, infinite bliss, infinite power. That's what you really are underneath everything. But you're covered in karmic particles, layers and layers of them accumulated over countless lifetimes. And these particles do two things. First, they obscure your soul's true nature. They're like mud on a diamond. The diamond is still there, still perfect, but you can't see its brilliance through all the dirt. Second, they weigh you down. They keep you bound to the material world, to the cycle of rebirth. They determine what body you're born into, what circumstances you face, what tendencies you have. Now here's the mechanism. How do these particles attach to your soul? Through passions. Kashayas, anger, pride, deceit, greed. These are the sticky substances that make karma adhere to your soul. Think of it like this. Your soul is naturally pure and karma repellent. But when you experience passion, when you get angry, when you lie, when you desire something intensely, you become like flypaper. Karmic particles floating in the universe suddenly stick to you, and different actions attract different types of karma. Jain philosophy identifies 8 main categories. Knowledge obscuring karma. Prevents you from knowing things clearly. Perception obscuring karma. Clouds your awareness and perception. Feeling producing karma. Determines whether you experience pleasure or pain. Diluting karma. The worst kind creates false beliefs and passions. Lifespan determining karma. Fixes how long you'll live in your next birth. Body producing karma. Determines what kind of body you'll have. Human, animal, etc. Status determining karma. Influences your social circumstances. Obstructive karma. Blocks your abilities and potential. Every action you take, every thought you think, attracts specific types of these particles. Violence attracts heavy, dark karma. Compassion attracts lighter karma. Lies obscure knowledge. Truth clarifies it. And here's the thing. Once karma attaches, it doesn't just sit there. It ripens, it matures. And when it ripens, it produces effects. You experience the consequences, in this life or a future one. You're born blind? That's knowledge obscuring karma from a past life ripening. You're born into poverty? Status determining karma. You have a short temper? Diluting karma that creates the passion of anger. Now, you might be thinking, this is just ancient superstition. There's no evidence for karmic particles. Fair. From a modern scientific perspective, this is unfalsifiable. We can't detect these particles, we can't measure them. We have no mechanism for how they would interact with consciousness. But here's what's philosophically interesting. Jainism is trying to solve a real problem. How do you explain moral causation? How do consequences from actions persist across time, even across lifetimes? Most religions say God keeps track and judges. Jainism says no, it's a natural process. Karma is the mechanism. It's trying to make ethics scientific, mechanical, lawful. If you do X, you get Y. Not because of divine judgment, but because of natural cause and effect. And here's the practical implication. You can do something about it. See, if karma is physical, then you can remove it. You can burn it off. You can prevent new karma from sticking. How? This is where the 5 great vows come back in. Ahimsa prevents violent karma from attaching. When you practice absolute nonviolence, you're not creating new karmic bonds through harm. Satya prevents diluting karma. Truth clarifies, lies obscure. Asteya prevents obstructive karma. Stealing blocks your own abilities. Brahmacharya prevents feeling-producing karma. Desire binds you to pleasure and pain. Aparigraha prevents all types of karma. Non-attachment means nothing sticks. But preventing new karma isn't enough. You've got lifetimes of accumulated karma already stuck to your soul. You need to burn that off. How? Through tapas, austerity, asceticism, spiritual discipline. Fasting burns karma. Meditation burns karma. Enduring hardship without complaint burns karma. Accepting suffering without generating new passions burns karma. This is why Jain monks practice such extreme asceticism. They're not punishing themselves. They're not trying to prove their devotion to God. They're literally burning off karmic particles through spiritual heat. Tapas. The word tapas actually means heat, or burning. It's the fire that purifies the soul, and as you burn off karma, your soul becomes lighter, clearer. More of its natural qualities shine through. You gain knowledge. You gain perception. You experience less suffering because there's less karma producing painful effects. Eventually, if you burn off all karma, every last particle, you achieve Kaval Jnana, omniscience. Your soul is completely pure, completely free. And when you die in that state, you don't get reborn. You're liberated. Moksha. Your soul rises to the top of the universe, literally, in Jain cosmology, and exists there forever in a state of infinite knowledge, perception, bliss, and power. Now here's the question that should be bothering you. Is this fair? You're born with karma from past lives you don't remember. You're dealing with consequences of actions you have no memory of taking. How is that just? Jain philosophy says, you're the same soul. The person you were in past lives is the same person you are now. You just don't remember. But the continuity is real. It's like being drunk and doing something stupid. The next morning, you don't remember it, but you still deal with the consequences. Same person, different state of consciousness. But here's what's really challenging. This means every circumstance you're born into, your body, your family, your abilities, your challenges, is the result of your own past actions. Nobody else is responsible. No God put you there. You put yourself there through karma. That's either incredibly empowering or incredibly harsh, depending on how you look at it. Empowering because you're not a victim of cosmic injustice, you're not being arbitrarily punished. Everything you experience is the natural consequence of natural law, and you can change your future by changing your actions now. Harsh because if you're suffering, it's because of your own past actions. If you're born into terrible circumstances, you earned that. No one to blame but yourself. Jain philosophers would say, both are true. It's harsh reality, but it's also empowering truth. You created your bondage. You can create your liberation. And here's the final piece. The soul is eternal. You've been doing this forever. Infinite past lives. You've been every kind of being. Human, animal, insect, God, demon. You've experienced every possible circumstance. The question isn't, how did I get here? The question is, how do I get out? And the answer is, stop attracting karma. Burn off what you have. Follow the path Mahavira laid out. It's simple. Not easy, but simple. Which brings us to the question, who gets to walk this path? Is liberation available to everyone? Or just to certain people? Because Mahavira's answer to that question was revolutionary in ways so we've established the mechanics of liberation, karma as physical particles, the soul obscured but capable of infinite knowledge, the path of burning off karmic bonds through discipline and the 5 great vows. Now comes the question that would have been explosive in ancient India. Who can achieve this? Mahavira's answer? Anyone. Everyone. Men and women. high caste and low caste, rich and poor, young and old. Every soul has exactly the same capacity for liberation. Every soul is, in its pure state, identical, infinite knowledge, infinite perception, infinite bliss, infinite power. The only difference between you and an enlightened being is karma. That's it. Not your gender, not your birth, not your social status, just karma. And karma can be removed. Now let me tell you why this was revolutionary. It's 6th century BC in India. The Vedic religion dominates, and in Vedic religion, spiritual authority belongs to Brahmins. The priestly caste, only they can perform rituals, only they can access sacred knowledge, only they can teach the Vedas. Women? Excluded from religious study. Lower castes? Forbidden from even hearing the Vedas. The spiritual hierarchy mirrors the social hierarchy. Your birth determines your spiritual potential. And then comes Mahavira, prince who walked away from power. And he says, that's all nonsense. Your birth doesn't determine your spiritual capacity. Your gender doesn't matter. Your caste doesn't matter. Only your karma matters, and you can change your karma. He accepted women as monks, full members of the Sangha, the spiritual community. They took the same vows as men. They practiced the same austerities. They studied the same teachings, and they achieved the same liberation. This wasn't symbolic. This wasn't women can be spiritual too, but in a different, lesser way. This was, women and men have identical spiritual potential. Period. In ancient India, this was radical. In many parts of the world today, it's still radical. Jain tradition records women who achieved Kevaljanana, omniscience, women who became spiritual teachers, women who led communities, not as exceptions, not as special cases, but as normal participants in the path to liberation. Now, I should mention there's been debate within Jainism about this. One sect, Digambaras, eventually developed the view that women must be reborn as men to achieve final liberation. But the other major sect, Shvetambaras, maintained Mahavira's original teaching. Women can achieve moksha in female form. But the core principle, that gender doesn't determine spiritual capacity, was revolutionary then and remains relevant now. Now let's expand the circle even further. Mahavira didn't just extend spiritual equality to women, he extended moral consideration to all living beings. Remember Ahimsa, absolute non-violence toward all living beings? This isn't just don't kill people. It's don't kill animals, don't kill insects, don't even kill plants unnecessarily. Why? Because every living being has a soul, jiva, and every soul in its pure state has the same potential for liberation. That mosquito? That's a soul trapped in karmic bondage just like you. It's experiencing suffering just like you. It's trying to survive just like you. You don't have the right to end its life just because you find it annoying. Think about what this means ethically. It's not anthropocentric, human-centered. It's biocentric, life-centered. All life has inherent value. All life deserves respect and compassion. This makes Jainism perhaps the world's first ecological philosophy. Respect for all life forms. Recognition that humans aren't the center of moral concern. We're one species among millions, all equally deserving of nonviolence. Jains practice vegetarianism, obviously, but it goes further. They don't eat root vegetables because harvesting them kills the plant. They don't eat after dark because insects might fly into their food. They filter water to avoid killing microorganisms. Is this extreme? Yes. Is it practical for everyone? No. But it's philosophically consistent. If all souls are equal, if all life deserves nonviolence, then you can't make arbitrary exceptions. You can't say humans count but animals don't, or mammals count but insects don't. Either all life matters or it doesn't. Now here's where this gets interesting for modern ethics. We're finally starting to take animal welfare seriously. We're recognizing that animals suffer, that they have interests, that factory farming is an ethical nightmare. We're starting to understand ecology, that we're part of an interconnected web of life, that destroying other species harms us too. We're developing environmental ethics, recognizing that we have obligations to the natural world, not just to other humans. Mahavira figured this out 2,600 years ago. Not through modern science, but through philosophical reasoning about the nature of souls and the principle of nonviolence. And here's the challenge his philosophy poses. If you accept that animals can suffer, that they have some moral status, where do you draw the line? Most people draw it somewhere. Mammals, yes. Insects, no. Pets, yes. Livestock, no. Endangered species, yes. Common ones, not so much. Jainism says, you can't draw a line. All life is sacred. All suffering matters. All violence creates karma. Now, practically speaking, even Jains recognize that some violence is unavoidable. You can't walk without killing microorganisms. You can't eat without harming some life. You can't live without causing some death. But the principle is, minimize it. Be conscious of it. Never take life unnecessarily. Never cause suffering carelessly. And this connects back to the equality principle. Why does all life deserve nonviolence? Because all souls are fundamentally equal. Because the soul trapped in an insect's body is the same kind of soul trapped in a human body, just weighed down by different karma. You could have been that insect in a past life. You might be that insect in a future life if you accumulate the wrong karma. So compassion isn't charity. It's recognition of fundamental equality. This is why Mahavira's philosophy is still challenging us. We like to think we've made moral progress. We've expanded the circle of moral concern from our tribe to our nation to all humans. But Mahavira expanded it to all life. And we're still not there. We're still treating the natural world as resources to exploit. We're still causing massive suffering to animals. We're still destroying ecosystems. Jainism asks, when will we take Ahimsa seriously? When will we extend nonviolence beyond our own species? Now here's the final piece about equality in Jain philosophy. It's grounded in metaphysics, not sentiment. We're not equal because we're all children of God. We're not equal because of human rights or social contracts or political philosophy. We're equal because we're all souls, and all souls, in their pure state, are identical. Same nature, same potential, same ultimate destination. The differences between us, body, gender, species, intelligence, circumstances, are all temporary. They're products of karma. They're not who we really are. Who we really are is pure consciousness with infinite potential. That's a profound basis for equality. It's not about surface similarities. It's not about shared characteristics. It's about shared essence, and it makes discrimination based on gender, caste, species, whatever, not just morally wrong but metaphysically confused. You're discriminating based on temporary karmic differences while ignoring fundamental eternal equality. So when we ask, what's Mahavira's legacy? One huge piece is this vision of radical equality, spiritual equality across gender, moral equality across species, a philosophy that refuses to create hierarchies of worth based on accidents of birth. In ancient India, this was revolutionary. In the modern world, it's still challenging us to expand our circle of compassion further than we're comfortable going. And that's what makes it philosophy worth taking seriously, even if we don't accept the metaphysics. Even if we don't believe in karma as physical particles or reincarnation or moksha. The ethical vision, absolute nonviolence, universal compassion, radical equality, that's still calling us to be better than we are. Which brings us to the final question. What happened to these ideas? Did they die with Mahavira, or did they survive, evolve, influence the world? Let's find out. So here's the question. Did Mahavira's radical philosophy survive? Or did it become a historical curiosity, studied by scholars but irrelevant to how people actually live? The answer is, it survived, it thrived, and it's still very much alive. Let me walk you through the timeline, because this is a story of resilience. 6th century BC, the foundation. Mahavira dies around 527 BC, but before he does, he's established something crucial. The Sangha, the community of practitioners, monks, nuns, and lay followers all committed to the path of liberation. And here's what's important. He didn't just leave behind ideas, he left behind institutions, monastic orders with rules, practices, lineages, a community that could preserve and transmit the teachings. Within his lifetime, thousands of people, men and women, renounced worldly life to become Jain monks and nuns. Tens of thousands more became lay followers, practicing modified versions of the vows while supporting the monastic community. This wasn't just a philosophical school, it was a living tradition. Ancient India, spread and influence. Over the next several centuries, Jainism spreads across the Indian subcontinent. Not through conquest, remember Ahimsa, but through teaching, example, and the compelling nature of the philosophy. Jain communities establish themselves in major cities. Wealthy merchants in particular are attracted to Jainism. Why? Because Jain ethics align well with business. Honesty in trade, Satya. Fair dealing, Asteya. Moderate lifestyle, Aparigraha. These aren't just moral principles, they're good business practices. And something remarkable happens. Jain business people become extraordinarily successful. They build wealth while maintaining ethical standards. And they use that wealth to support the Sangha, build temples, commission art and architecture. Some of the most stunning temples in India are Jain temples. The marble temples at Ranakpur and Dilwara, carved with such intricate detail that they look like lace made of stone. These aren't just religious buildings, they're philosophical statements in architecture. Every carving, every column, every dome expresses Jain principles of beauty, precision, and reverence for life. And Jainism influences Indian philosophy more broadly. The concept of Ahimsa spreads beyond Jain communities. It influences Buddhism, obviously. Buddha and Mahavira were contemporaries, and there was cross-pollination of ideas. It influences certain schools of Hinduism. It becomes part of the broader Indian ethical consciousness. Medieval period, scholarship and preservation. Here's where it gets interesting. While much of the world was experiencing what we call the Dark Ages, Jain scholars were preserving knowledge, advancing mathematics, contributing to astronomy and logic. Jain monks were meticulous record keepers. They copied manuscripts, preserved texts, documented history. They developed sophisticated logical systems, expanding on Mahavira's Anekantavada and Syadvada. They made contributions to mathematics, including early work on infinity, zero, and combinatorics. Why? Because Jain cosmology required calculating vast numbers, infinite time periods, countless souls, multiple realms of existence. They needed mathematical tools to express these concepts. And they built libraries. Jain libraries in places like Patan and Jaisalmer contain some of the oldest surviving manuscripts in India. Not just religious texts, scientific treatises, literary works, historical records. Why did they preserve all this? Because of a Jain principle: knowledge is sacred. Destroying knowledge is violence against the potential for understanding. So they protected it, even when it wasn't specifically Jain knowledge. The split: Digambaras and Shvetambaras. Now, I should mention that Jainism didn't remain monolithic. A few centuries after Mahavira, the community split into two major sects: Digambaras, sky-clad, meaning naked, and Shvetambaras, white-clad, wearing white robes. They disagree on some practices and interpretations. Digambara monks practice complete nudity, as Mahavira did. Shvetambara monks wear simple white robes. Digambaras eventually developed the view that women must be reborn as men to achieve final liberation. Shvetambaras maintain that women can achieve moksha in female form. But both sects maintain the core teachings: the 5 great vows, Anekantavada, the path to moksha through burning off karma. The differences are real but not fundamental. And both communities survived, adapted, continued the tradition. Modern era, global Jainism. Fast forward to today, there are about 4 to 5 million Jains worldwide. That's a tiny percentage of the global population, but their influence far exceeds their numbers. Why? Because Jain principles, particularly Ahimsa and Anekantavada, resonate with modern concerns. Animal rights movements. Jains have been practicing and advocating for animal welfare for 2,600 years. They run animal hospitals, bird sanctuaries, shelters for injured animals. The principle that all life deserves compassion, that's ancient Jain teaching applied in modern contexts. Environmental ethics. Jains have been environmentally conscious since before environment was a word. Minimal consumption, respect for all life forms, recognition of interconnectedness. These are core Jain values that align perfectly with modern ecology. Interfaith dialogue. Anekantavada, the doctrine of multiple perspectives, provides a philosophical framework for religious pluralism. Jains have been leaders in promoting tolerance and mutual understanding between different faith traditions. Business ethics. Jain entrepreneurs and business leaders are known for ethical practices, fair dealing, and philanthropy. They've shown that you can be successful in business while maintaining strict ethical standards. And here's something remarkable. Jain communities have adapted to modernity while maintaining core principles. Jains are highly educated, professionally successful, globally mobile, yet they maintain their practices. Vegetarianism, regular fasting, support for monastic communities, celebration of religious festivals, Mahavira Jayanti, living tradition. Every year, millions of Jains celebrate Mahavira Jayanti, Mahavira's birthday. Not as a historical commemoration, but as a living celebration of his teachings. They fast, they visit temples, they listen to teachings, they renew their commitment to the vows, they reflect on Ahimsa and how to practice it more fully. This isn't ancestor worship. This is active engagement with a philosophy that still guides how people live. And Jain monks and nuns still exist. Thousands of them, still taking the same vows Mahavira prescribed. Still practicing extreme asceticism. Still teaching the path to liberation. In a world of smartphones and social media, there are people walking barefoot through India, owning nothing, eating one meal a day, devoted entirely to spiritual purification. That's the survival of an ancient tradition in the modern world. Global influence beyond Jainism. But here's what's really interesting. Mahavira's ideas have influenced people who've never heard of Jainism. Mahatma Gandhi? Not a Jain, but deeply influenced by Jain principles of Ahimsa. His entire philosophy of nonviolent resistance, Satyagraha, draws on Jain concepts. And through Gandhi, these ideas influenced Martin Luther King Jr., Nelson Mandela, and civil rights movements worldwide. The modern vegetarian and vegan movements, they're rediscovering arguments Jains made millennia ago about the moral status of animals and the ethics of diet. Environmental philosophy, deep ecology, animal rights theory, biocentric ethics. These contemporary movements are arriving at conclusions Jainism reached in the 6th century BC: religious pluralism and tolerance. Anekantavada provides a philosophical basis for respecting diverse viewpoints without collapsing into relativism. In our polarized world, that's desperately needed. So when we ask what's Mahavira's legacy, it's not just the Jain community, as important as that is. It's a set of ideas that keep proving relevant, keep challenging us, keep offering alternatives to how we typically think about violence, truth, and freedom. The paradox of influence. And here's the paradox. Jainism has remained small precisely because it takes its principles so seriously. It doesn't proselytize aggressively, that would be a form of violence, forcing beliefs on others. It doesn't compromise core teachings to attract more followers. It maintains high standards even when that limits growth. But those very principles, the uncompromising commitment to nonviolence, truth, and spiritual discipline, are what make it influential. People respect the integrity. They're attracted to the philosophical coherence. They recognize the wisdom even if they don't convert. So Mahavira's legacy isn't measured in numbers of followers. It's measured in the power of ideas to survive, adapt, and continue challenging each generation to live more ethically, think more clearly, and seek genuine freedom. And that brings us to the final question. What does all this mean for us? Here. Now. In the 21st century. What can Mahavira's 2,600-year-old philosophy possibly teach us about how to live today? Turns out quite a lot.